Greetings, friends, and good morning. It is Wednesday, December 27, 2017. Welcome back to Scripture and Prophecy. I'm your host, Sean, and the website is www.scriptureandprophecy.com. And today we are doing our study in the book of Genesis, chapter 38 and 39. Now, chapter 38 deals with Judah and Tamar, and it's a very, I don't even know how you would describe this story, but you'll see when we get there. And then chapter 39 deals with Joseph and Potiphar's wife, so there's a lot of lessons to be learned from these chapters. This one, like I said, chapter 38, it's an interesting chapter, and you'll see why here in just a minute. And it just really shows that, even back then, the corruption and the wickedness of a man's heart, no different than today. Really no different than today. And so that's what we're going to be doing. I hope you all had a great Christmas holiday. Hope you had a great weekend. Obviously, we're not on any normal schedule this week with the podcast, so I'm just going to get them out when I can. And so that's why today's is a little bit late, and hopefully you understand that. But I hope you all had a blessed and very Merry Christmas, and hopefully you drew closer to the Lord, and hopefully closer to His Son, to our Savior, Jesus, the Messiah, the Christ. All right, well, let's get into it. It's going to be an interesting chapter, a couple of chapters here. Genesis chapter 38. And it came to pass at that time that Judah went down from his brethren and turned into a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. And he took her and went unto her. And she conceived and bare a son. And he called his name And she conceived again and bare a son. And she called his name Onan. And she yet conceived and bare a son, and called his name Shelah. And he was Chazib, for she bare him. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, whose name was Tamar. And Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. And Judah said unto Onan, Go in unto thy brother's wife, and marry her, and raise up seed to thy brother. And Onan knew that the seed should not be his. And it came to pass, when he went into his brother's wife, that he spilled it on the ground, lest that he should give seed to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased the Lord. Wherefore he slew him also. All right. So what we have going on here, Judah has a couple of sons, and the first son was really, really wicked in the eyes of the Lord, so God slew him. And the scripture doesn't tell us, exactly why or how he was wicked, just that he was, and it was in the sight of the Lord, and so the Lord slew him. And then so the second son, Onan, I suppose the tradition has it that if the older son who is married dies, then the next son up who is not married would marry the widow and then raise children up for the seed of his brother. And then, of course, Onan thought, I don't want to do this. This seed won't even be my own child. It'll be raised up as my brother's child. So he would spill it on the ground. And this was evil in the sight of the Lord, so he slew him also. So here we have Tamar, who's now widowed twice, and that's the situation we're in. And you're might be thinking, wow, this is kind of graphic and a lot of wickedness going on here. Well, it gets worse. So let's move on to verse 11. Then said Judah to Tamar his daughter-in-law, Remain a widow at thy father's house till Shelah my son be grown. For he said, Lest peradventure he die also, as his brethren did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. And in the process of time the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was comforted, and he went up to the sheep shearers to Timnath, and he and his friend Hira, the Adullamite. And it was told Tamar, saying, Behold, thy father-in-law goeth up to Timnath to shear his sheep. And she put her widow's garments off from her, and covered her with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place which is by the way of Timnath. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given unto him to wife. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot, because she had covered her face. And he turned unto her by the way, and he said, Go to, I pray thee, let me come into thee. For he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, What wilt thou give me, that thou mayest come into me? And he said, I will send thee a kid from the flock. And she said, Wilt thou give me a pledge till thou send it? And he said, What pledge shall I give thee? And she said, Thy signet, and thy bracelets, and thy staff that is in thy hand. And he gave it to her, and he came in unto her, and she conceived by him. And she arose, and went away, and laid by her veil from her, and put on the garments of her widowhood. All right. What we have going on here is Tamar's upset because Judah promised that his next son in line, when he was of age, he would give unto her to marry. He didn't fulfill his promise. So she takes off her widow's clothes, puts a veil on, and goes sits in the open area where she knew Judah was going to be passing through. Judah comes through, thinks that she's a prostitute, thinks that she's a harlot, and then wants to hire her. And so, so that's what's taking place. And then he says, I'll pay you with a goat. And she said, what are you going to give me until the goat arrives? And so he gives her his ring and his bracelet and his staff as a pledge until the goat should arrive to pay for the prostitution. Verse 20. And Judah sent the kid by the hand of his friend Adullamite to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he found her not. Then he asked the men of that place, saying, Where is the harlot that was openly by the wayside? And they said, There was no harlot in this place. And he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. And also the men of the place said that there was no harlot in this place. And Judah said, Let her take it to her, lest we be shamed. Behold, I sent this kid, and thou hast not found her. And it came to pass about 3 months after, that it was told to Judah, Behold, saying, Tamar thy daughter-in-law hath played the harlot, and also, behold, she is with child by whoredom. And Judah said, Bring her forth, and let her be burnt. And of course, just look at this hypocrisy of Judah. So Judah goes, hires a prostitute, no big deal, having trouble finding her so he can pay her. Doesn't even know that it's his daughter-in-law, Tamar. Then it's told to him that Tamar has been acting like a harlot, played the harlot, the King James says, and that she's got a child from this act. And so Judah's like, okay, well, that's not acceptable, so bring her forth to be burnt. So it's okay for him to go hire a prostitute, but if somebody plays the harlot, that person should be burnt to death. It's very, just loads of hypocrisy here, loads of wickedness. Verse 25. When she was brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, By the man, whose these are? Am I with child? And she said, Discern, I pray thee, whose are these, the signet, the bracelet, and the staff? And Judah acknowledged them, and said, She hath been more righteous than I, because that I gave her not to Shelah my son. And he knew her again no more. And so he does own it, says, okay, I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I didn't fulfill my end of the bargain. And therefore, she wasn't put to death. Verse 27, And it came to pass in the time of her travail that, behold, twins were in her womb. And it came to pass that when she travailed, the one put out his hand, And the midwife took and bound upon his hand a scarlet thread, saying, This came first. And it came to pass, as he drew back his hand, that behold, his brother came out. And she said, How hast thou broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Therefore his name was called Pharez. And afterward came out his brother, that had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zerah. And that is chapter 38. And before I get into 39, we might be wondering, why is this story even in here? Why is this information even in here? And, it might be, and I'm going to read you the commentary from Matthew Henry here, and I happen to agree with it. The point is to show you that God's grace and mercy, because here we have Judah, the one that the Messiah would come from, right? Judah is the line that the Jewish people come from, the one that the Messiah would come from, the son of David would come from. And in spite of Judah's wickedness, God still shows mercy and still allows the Messiah to come from that bloodline. I mean, if you look at the wickedness here, I mean, Judah, he's hiring a prostitute. I mean, there's just all kinds of wickedness and ungodliness taking place here. Here's what Matthew Henry has to say. He says, This chapter gives an account of Judah and his family. And such an account it is, that it seems a wonder that out of all of Jacob's sons, our Lord should spring out of Judah. But God will show that his choice is of grace, not of merit, and that Christ came into the world to save sinners, even the chief. And so I just think that's a great way to sum it, to look at it, to sum it up. God's grace is by choice, not by merit, as you can plainly see by the house of Judah here. All right, let's move on to chapter 39. And then we'll wrap this up. Chapter 39, verse 1, And Joseph was brought down to Egypt. And Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. And it came to pass, from the time that he had made him overseer in the house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person, and well favored. And it came to pass after these things, that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, Lie with me. But he refused. And he said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wotteth not, what is this with me in this house? And he hath committed all that he hath in my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Now let me stop right there. Another thing to notice is the parallel between these two chapters. Both of them are dealing with a choice of sexual immorality, being godly or being not godly, being righteous or being wicked. Judah chose to do wickedness, and so did his sons. So his sons were wicked. Judah was wicked. He approaches a woman who he thinks is a prostitute, and then by accident ends up sleeping with his daughter-in-law and conceiving children with her. Whereas Joseph here is approached with the temptation of sexual sin from Potiphar's wife. Joseph has everything but the Potiphar's wife, which he points out. He says that my master's withheld nothing from me but you. And then he says, no, I'm not going to do this wicked thing. So you see this parallel between righteous and wickedness. Verse 10. And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie by her, or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. and he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. Another thing to notice, Joseph's attitude towards sin was not to, okay, let's dabble with sin. Let's just see where this leads, I'll try to resist the actual sin nature, He wasn't going to have anything to do with it. He ran to the point where he was willing to lose his garments and be naked and run naked. This is a great example of how we are to act towards this type of sin, fleeing from it, running from it. Joseph is a great example of righteousness. Verse 13, and it came to pass when she saw that he left his garment in her hand, and he was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house, and she spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and fled and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me and to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound. And he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to any that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. And that's the end of chapter 39. And so with this chapter, we see the temptation. Joseph does the right thing because he's a righteous and godly man, but even sometimes in this life, doing the right thing leads to something that we would consider to be awful. Joseph does the right thing, and what happens? He ends up in prison. He would have been better off probably to just sleep with the Potiphar's wife as far as the world's concerned. But like the scriptures say, the Lord works those things out for good for those who love him, right? And who are called according to his purpose. And so, while on the outside it looks like Joseph's being cursed for doing the right thing, what we know, because we know what happens in the following chapters, is that it was for Joseph's own good. And even in the midst of the trial, the Lord's still blessing him. As you can see, he finds favor with the prison guard and ends up being over all the other prisoners. And so everywhere Joseph goes, the Lord's blessing his hands, whether it be in prison, whether it be in Potiphar's house. This is a guy who was sold into slavery. Then as he's the head of the household, has everything that he can, and even when that falls apart, he goes to prison, but then he's the head of everything going on in the prison. So everywhere Joseph goes, he's in charge because the Lord is with him. And there's just something about when you walk in righteousness and you walk in the favor of God. This is the kind of things that follow you. Well, there you have it, folks. That's chapter 38 and 39. I hope that it was a blessing to you this morning. Sorry if I sounded more rambly than normal. Sometimes it's hard to, you take some time off from doing the podcast, and then it's hard to get back into the flow of it. But I pray that it blessed you, and we'll be back with you again, hopefully shortly, sometime this week with our gospel study for this week. Peace and grace be with all of you, and until next time, God bless.